You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Tick-tock, another inch closer on the electoral clock. Meanwhile, Florida and Louisiana flinch at another hurricane in a way stronger than normal category. Oregon declares itself a disaster, and California's in flames because of record wildfires. And the climate change deniers, including delusional Donald, go right on denying. Plus, of course, more thousands of Americans die from the coronavirus pandemic, but science deniers, including Trump, who we now know lied about knowing better, keeps on denying. But there's Venus. Possible life on Venus. This is wonderfully intriguing, possibly heartening news. And on today's program, we continue with our new plan to dive deeper into one subject rather than skim the surfaces of many, at least for the foreseeable election future. So today, the subject is the census. Oh, I can hear you. The census? What's meaningful about the census? Strangers come to your door and ask a lot of questions, kind of invading your privacy and mostly taking your time, and then they disappear and you send something in and that's the last you ever hear of it. Boring, boring, boring. Well, you ain't counted nothing yet. We are going to explore what is a major political tool and the way in which it was re-engineered by our founders in an act of real genius to further democracy, and the way it's being manipulated right now to do the opposite. My guest for the conversation today is Maria Olmedo-Malagon, Program Manager of the 2020 Census Communications Campaign for the U.S. Census Bureau, and she is pulling out the stops to encourage participation. But before we hear about that, we need to go inside the headlines. The census is in trouble. But unlike the Postal Service, another fundamental American institution under siege, the census is not garnering public support. Last April, the Census Bureau announced it would extend the count to October 31st due to the virus, but on August the 3rd, under pressure from the White House, it was moved up to September 30th. This is demonstrably nuts during a pandemic, but it guarantees that the population figures will be delivered to the White House in December while Trump is still in office. Senior Census Bureau officials said that the Bureau could no longer provide a complete, accurate account with such a short timeline, and members of Congress expressed grave concern. The short timeline also shrinks procedures for analyzing and for correcting problems. This has sparked numerous lawsuits in yet another attempt to save a major government function from erosion or outright destruction. Today, more than 1 in 3 people hired as census takers have quit or failed to show up because of the virus. More than a third of U.S. households have not yet responded, more than any at this stage in a previous census, and rising mistrust in Trump's government on the part of hard-to-reach groups like immigrants and the Latinx community were already challenges beforehand. The Trump regime wants to delete undocumented immigrants from the totals before sending the census in January to Congress in order to reapportion the House of Representatives. Now that plan, which also faces court challenges, would reshuffle House seats to give an advantage to the Republican Party. It comes as the administration has installed political appointees in the Census Bureau's top ranks to give Republicans an even greater edge. The result will be gerrymandered districts, even worse than the current 12 worst House districts, some of which are so contorted they look like ducks or snakes. But the Supreme Court ruled last June that the courts have no role in ending partisan gerrymandering. Only states do, which often are in the same gubernatorial hands. On September 10th, a federal court ruled that excluding undocumented immigrants from being counted for apportionment would violate the statute that says apportionment must be based on everyone who is a resident of the United States, regardless of legal status. The ruling came hours after a federal judge ordered the Trump regime to produce internal documents connected to their sudden decision to end the 2020 census count a month earlier than the Bureau had planned. So that's hopeful, that decision. But the time is very, very short, though the history of the census is quite long. Here, with the help of the Population Reference Bureau, are only some of its highlights. Censuses have been around almost forever. From Babylon to China to India to Russia, governments needed to tax people and conscript soldiers, so they counted men. In 3800 BCE, before Common Era, the Babylonian Empire took the first known census, counting livestock and quantities of butter, honey, milk, wool, and vegetables. In 2 CE, China's Han Dynasty recorded the oldest surviving census data, showing a population of 57.7 million people living in 12.4 million households. Chengdu, the largest city, had a population of 282,000 people. In 1086, while not a census in the strictest sense, the Doomsday Book surveyed English landowners and their holdings, forming the basis for the tax system implemented by William the Conqueror. Between 1250 and 1270, the Mongols took a census of captured Chinese, Russian, and Asian territories to demand resources from conquered peoples in exchange for a peace treaty. The resources were used to conduct further conquests. In 1400, without a written language, the Incas used a system of knots on strings made from llama or alpaca hair to record census data and to administer their empire. In the 1700s and 1800s, European colonialist nations like England, France, and Denmark avoided conducting censuses of their own countries due to opposition from the nobility, who feared losing power to the central government. The story was quite different, though, when it came to their colonies in the Americas, the Caribbean, and Iceland, where censuses were used to promote growth and keep the colonies under control and well taxed. In 1790, enumerators on horseback began the first U.S. census, which took 18 months to complete. The results were used to establish the size of the House of Representatives. Enslaved people were counted as 3/5 of a person until after the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, and Native Americans weren't counted at all until 1860. But between 1850 and 1860, anti-slavery campaigners used data from 2 consecutive U.S. censuses to build support for abolition by showing that the number of enslaved people in the United States was rising, contrary to arguments made by pro-slavery politicians. In 1864, during the Civil War, Major General William Tecumseh Sherman marched Union troops through Georgia to the sea in record time because he relied on census data to find local resources for his army rather than establish long supply lines. But wait, let's back up just a bit to ask why Jefferson, Madison, and the founders enshrined the census in our Constitution. Because the U.S. Constitution does empower the Congress to carry out the census in, quote, such manner as they shall by law direct, close quote, that's Article 1, Section 2. And the founders had a visionary plan to empower the people over their new government. The plan was to count every person living in the newly created United States of America and to use that count to determine representation in the Congress. Enshrining this invention in our Constitution marked a turning point in world history. Previously, censuses had been used mainly to tax or to confiscate property or to conscript male youth into military service. The genius of the founders was taking a tool of government and making it a tool of political empowerment for the governed over their government. The first census began more than a year after the inauguration of President Washington and shortly before the second session of the first Congress ended. Congress assigned responsibility for the 1790 census to the marshals of the U.S. judicial districts. The pay allowed for the 1790 enumerators was very small and did not exceed $1 for 50 people properly recorded on the rolls. The first federal Congress established a special committee to prepare the questions to be included in the first census. The suggestions were likely debated in the House, and according to a report in a Boston newspaper, Virginia Representative James Madison recommended at least 5 of the initial 6 questions. The 6 inquiries in 1790 called for questions on gender, race, relationship to the head of household, name of the head of household, and the number of slaves, if any. Marshals in some states went beyond these questions and collected data on occupation and the number of dwellings in a city or town. The first census in 1790 was managed under the direction of one Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State. Marshals took the census in the original 13 states, plus the districts of Kentucky, Maine, and Vermont, and the Southwest Territory, Tennessee. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson was nominal supervisor of the census on Census Day, August 2, 1790. As for the importance of apportionment, well, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution mandates that an apportionment of representatives among the states must be carried out every 10 years. Apportionment is the original legal purpose of the decennial census, as intended by our nation's founders. Apportionment is the process of dividing the 435 memberships or seats in the House of Representatives among the 50 states based on the state population counts that result from each decennial census. The apportionment results will be the first data published from the 2020 census, and those results are going to determine the amount of political representation each state will have in Congress for the next 10 years. So, now you see why the current regime might wish to manipulate it. 10 years, folks. 10 years. We have to take our first break here, but there's so much more coming up, including our very special guest. And I'm willing to wager that if you haven't already filled out your census questionnaire, well, by the end of this program, I bet you will run, not walk, to spend the incredibly lengthy time, that is, less than 10 minutes, doing so online, because all of the instructions are there at the end of the program, and the reassurance that citizenship is not, repeat, not one of the questions. That was a court triumph over the Trump administration. So, but before any of that, we need to go into the surrealism corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
If we're doing the census, that means we can count on being in the surrealism corner. Well, here we go. In 1871, British officials required their standard list of jobs be used in India's census, highlighting cultural differences as census takers struggled to classify such occupations in India as, quote, jokers, storytellers, hail averters, and prayer mutterers, close quote. The local population was also reluctant to participate because of rumors that the goal of the count was to identify girls to be sent to England to fan Queen Victoria during a heatwave. In 1890, the first electric tabulating machines were introduced in the United States Census, hugely advancing the technological development of census taking. In 1958, responding to a need for international standards, the United Nations Statistical Commission issued the first set of principles and recommendations for population and housing censuses. They became a cornerstone of the first World Population and Housing Census program. In 2001, more than 390,000 census respondents in England and Wales self-identify as followers of the Jedi faith after an internet campaign that claimed incorrectly that the Jedi belief system would receive official government recognition as a religion if it received enough support. Said one supporter, "Do it because you love Star Wars, or do it just to annoy people." In 2010, China's census records the largest population to date in the world. It relied on 10 million census workers, roughly equivalent to the population of Belgium, to count 1.3 billion people, including 23 million Taiwanese. But now we also need to backtrack again a bit, because the most surreal aspect of the surrealism corner is that the work women do in the census isn't, well, in it. Yes. Pause for the sound of female human beings falling on the ground in a dead faint. So in 1988, a book by Marilyn J. Waring, a former parliamentarian from New Zealand, broke on the census shore like a tsunami. It seems that the work of more than half the world's population wasn't being accounted for in censuses or anywhere else for that matter, at all. Only wage labor market work was factored in, and this exclusion had been formally institutionalized in the United Nations system of national accounts, which in turn forms the basis for all the censuses globally. So, for example, if you mined coal, as mostly men do, your work was counted. But if you gathered wood or peat or cow dung for fuel, as millions of women across the global south do, your work vanished. As did all housework: shopping, putting groceries away, cooking, washing up, dusting, vacuum, tidying, sorting and washing and drying and folding laundry, driving kids to school, extracurricular activities, gardening, keeping social calendars, etc., ad nauseum, plus volunteer work, so-called hidden economy labor, being prostituted, used for surrogacy, used for involuntary organ donation, subsistence farming, herding, and so on. Even the basic reproductive work of pregnancy, childbirth, nursing, and child-rearing, invisible. Indeed, every medical professional in a delivery room performs work considered productive and therefore counted, except the work by the woman in labor herself. She is not productive because she didn't produce anything tangibly saleable. Of course, she produced the labor force itself, which in turn produced everything else, but hey, details, never mind. This is crucial, since resources are allotted by governments back to those productive workers, but not anyone else. Most women labor, in effect, under feudalism, not capitalism. Women in the developing world are responsible for more than 50% of all food production. On the African continent, women do 60 to 80% of all agricultural work. In Europe and North America, women constitute well over 40% of the paid labor force, in addition to contributing more than 40% of the gross domestic product in unpaid labor in the home. Women are the primary caregivers of the elderly and the ill, as well as comprising, with children, 90% of all refugee populations. So the international housing crisis is a woman's problem. Women are the founders of spontaneous squatters' movements, articulating the connections between housing crises, overcrowding, and the rise in wife battery and child sexual abuse. Although various feminist economists had grazed over the problem of women's unpaid labor as early as the 1940s, even Engels had taken a stab at it, but backed away rapidly. Waring was the first to exhaustively research and expose the full depth and breadth of this stunning erasure. It caused quite a sensation. Now, more than 20 years later, If Women Counted, A New Feminist Economics, the name of the book, published as Counting for Nothing across the Commonwealth, has spawned a Canadian documentary film, countless papers and books, and honors for its author. More importantly, it influenced the 1995 Beijing UN Conference for Women toward making women's economic contribution visible in statistics. Eurostat, the statistical office of the European Union, developed methods for household satellite accounts for Europe, and Canadian national statistics contributed the method of development in the USA. Furthermore, although unpaid household work doesn't count toward Social Security entitlements, the care credit, introduced in 1992 in Norway, is a step toward recognizing unpaid household work as a basis for future income security. The ripple effects have been felt in Finland and in Denmark as well, and have influenced research on such specifics as the economic value of breastfeeding, thus helping to shape Australian health and employment policy. The work of actually changing policy is political, and while maddeningly slow, it does go on and progress slightly. In the meanwhile, if you're up at 4 a.m. with a sick child's fever, that doesn't count as productive labor, just so you know. And that is surreal. Time for another quick break, and then we'll be back directly with our special guest. And we're going to ask her how much, if any, progress we're making on including women's unpaid labor in the census, and other things as well. Again, coming right up. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Maria Olmedo-Malagon, the program manager of the 2020 Census Communications Campaign for the U.S. Census Bureau, oversees a $415 million communications campaign that encompasses paid advertising, public relations and events, social media, development of digital platforms, and national and local partnerships. Previously, she was the Assistant Division Chief for Program Management and Communication at the Bureau's American Community Survey Office, where she oversaw all management, data user education, outreach, and promotional efforts related to the survey. So this is a woman who really knows the census, and we're honored to have her with us. Here is Maria Olmedo-Malagon. Maria, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you today.
Well, you are in a pickle. Well, you're not, but the census is. It's sort of suspended animation, isn't it? Just a day or so ago, U.S. District Judge Lucy Cole in, I think it was in California, threw the national headcount into uncertainty further because the blessed National Urban League had continued its legal fight to provide the Census Bureau with more time to tally the population and review the results. I think she delayed it until September 22nd. So, since career officials like you at the Bureau have warned that you need more time to avoid risking serious errors, and are pushing to extend the census schedule, especially during the pandemic, where does this leave us at the moment?
Well, it leaves us with the Census Bureau continue the commitment that we all have on counting everyone. That's our goal. That's why we exist. We like to count everyone. So this leaves us in the same work that we had last week, which was keep being focused in counting everyone. We have almost 300,000 enumerators in the streets working very, very hard on counting everybody, and they have been doing a fabulous job. We have a self-response rate of almost 66%, but with the work that they have been doing, that response rate goes to 93%. So we are really, really close to our goal. And we keep going everywhere. Like we keep our advertising alive. We are everywhere, TV, radio, mostly digital, because we know that a lot of our hard to count audiences, for example, they don't have access to cable or
exactly.
TV, but they can have access to a cell phone. So we do a lot of digital on social media, on texting, on email. We're everywhere.
Right.
On top of that, we have almost 400,000 community partners. And I have to say that our community partners, together with our enumerators, are our heroes, because they do a lot of work, like a lot of grassroots work. And not only that, but the pandemic has been very difficult. Like in an unusual census year, you will have these community partners doing events, like allowing us in their churches, health clinics,
right.
community festivals, things like that. Right now, they are doing everything virtual or anywhere that they can.
Right.
Like if, for example, there is school lunches, they bring materials to the school lunches. If there is like a school supplies distribution, a food bank distributing food, they bring our materials over there. So they are doing a lot of the work that we cannot do. And so everyone keeps the mission of counting everybody. So this is fantastic. We are just continuing the work that we have been doing.
Well, thank God for the dark state, as the administration would call it, the bureaucrats, because this is very important work. It occurred to me, in fact, how painful it must have been, particularly for you, because I know you have a background in messaging specifically to immigrant and undocumented and mixed status families, and when your erstwhile boss, Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Commerce, I believe, in addition to all of his other sins, like contempt of Congress, he added the question, is this person a citizen, to the census, and had to be knocked down by the courts. So I thought to myself, here is this woman on the one hand reaching out like crazy to all these communities, some of whom are wired, some of whom are not wired. It's a very complex situation, some of whom have to be visited in person. All of these different languages that the census is in to make it more accessible. And meanwhile, here is he sort of waltzing in and saying there should be a citizenship question, which, fortunately, as we have stated many times on this program, there is not. So thank God for you, Maria, and for all of the rest of the dark state there.
We keep emphasizing that there is not a citizenship question, and there's nothing to be afraid for any immigrant. The census is not asking anything like that. It's asking very simple
Right.
I would say, well, I'm not going to say they're not personal questions because they are personal questions, but it's not much more than it's asked on a supermarket frequent customer card.
Exactly.
I love to say that because it is the truth. Sometimes at the supermarket, they ask you for more information for a
Much
frequent
more.
customer card than what we ask.
Oh, yeah, and they
Much
want your
more.
credit card, and they want
Better.
they want much more than this. No. This is a piece of cake compared.
It is a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So we're not asking citizenship or income and social security numbers. So people should not be afraid. They should be afraid of losing the community funding that goes everywhere, every corner of our nation every year, thanks to census data.
That's right. And they also should be afraid of, especially of reapportionment, because, of course, this is what the Congress is based on. And I think that this is... doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out that the administration wanted the earlier date, because then the results go to the White House earlier, they go to Congress earlier, and the apportionment is based on figures that the Census Bureau senior officials themselves have said will be short, because they're in states like California or Texas, where there is a very large immigrant population. You just don't have the count, the way that you should have it if it's that early. So is the feeling that the judge will, she put it off until September 22nd, which is pretty late, that she will extend the deadline? Is that the scuttlebutt, or can you not say?
So we're just waiting for guidance. We keep working, as I said. We haven't stopped. This week we have been approving even more advertisements, particularly digital ones. We have been approving messages through social media influencers. We have been doing business as usual, or as I would say usual, but honestly, it's different because this was totally unexpected. We didn't think the pandemic, or we will have a pandemic this year, delaying
Of course.
so much. But we are doing business as usual, in which we keep working, we keep producing messages, we keep talking to the media, we keep our partners and sending materials to our partners. We keep working on this. It's our focus, and we are just waiting guidance, and we will work with whatever guidance we obtain.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for you, and that there will be an extension, and that you'll have some time to breathe and deliver it at the end of October or later, even given the pandemic. I have one more question to ask you, and I'm hoping that we can think big on this. As you no doubt know, women's unpaid labor has never been factored into the U.S. Census, although it's become quite a statistical thing with a capital T around the world. And in some countries, it is beginning to be factored into the census. So since we know that women can constitute over 40% in the labor force, and it's almost double that in unpaid labor at home, all that cooking and cleaning and washing and sewing and shopping and making meals and then washing up after meals and then folding the laundry and sorting the laundry and gardening and shoving the children around. I mean, we could go crazy from exhaustion, but it doesn't count. It always says on the census forms, skip to question 34 because if you're just a housewife. So is there any light at the end of the tunnel that is not an unrushing train that shows us that there might at some point in the United Nations system of national accounts on which this is based factor in women's unpaid labor? Is there any hope?
So I don't think that necessarily through the decennial census. I can see some hope through the American Community Survey, that, as you know, is what used to be the long form of the census, and it's where we really do a lot of labor analysis. I know a lot of people at the Census Bureau that will be very interested in looking at that. Quite frankly, a lot of these come from our agency partners. Other federal agencies are the ones that actually ask for this type of questions. So I always tell stakeholders that they keep talking to our federal partners who will be the ones that will be most likely to push this and really take the lead on this fight. That being said, there has been a lot of studies that we have been doing about women and census and our different questions. I have been working very closely with one of our researchers who is very interested in this topic, and some of our ideas go to after the census, after we are done with the count. We would really like to conduct more research, probably focus groups, interviews on a lot of like women and census topics, because we think it's key. Women at the end of the day are the ones that our hypothesis say that probably are the ones filling the form.
Yes, yeah.
No matter that sometimes they don't write the form like they are the one, like they are the ones filling it. They usually write the name of the husband first. We strongly believe that this is part of women's duties, like filling the census and filling our survey. So we really are looking to explore that through some research that we would like to propose to the agency after the census is over.
So maybe within the next decennial, within the next 10 years, maybe 10 years from now, there will actually be
there are a lot of ideas that I have for the next decennial and definitely for the American Community Survey.
Yeah, because, internationally, of course, it's even worse. I mean, in the global south, in the African continent, women do 80% of food production. So it begins to be absolutely absurd that there's this great gaping hole of statistical information, which happens to be female people. So I'm very relieved to know, well, not relieved, that isn't the word, but I'm anticipating the inclusion within the next 10 years. And I want to thank you for all the dark state work that you do as beloved, blessed bureaucrats, because you're keeping us going until we can change the administration. And I'm extremely grateful to you that in the face of all of this pressure, you are keeping your head down and still trying to amass as much data as humanly possible. We've done the entire program about this, its history, funny stories, serious stories, its current situation and its future, in trying to get people to turn out in the same massive numbers that we hope they'll turn out for the vote in November for the census, because this was begun by the framers, and the apportionment alone is so crucial, as well as the resources that go back to communities. Without the reapportionment, we're going to have such gerrymandering that it'll take your breath away. So thank you, Maria, and everybody at the Census Bureau, except the boys at the very, very top who were appointed. Maybe them I'll reserve my thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us today. It's always great to bring out like our messages. So thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us.
We need to take one last break, and then we'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Never more than now. All Americans count for something. And those are fighting words. The Supreme Court recently described the census as, quote, the linchpin of the federal statistical system, collecting data on the characteristics of individuals, households, and housing units throughout the country, close quote. The website is my2020census.gov, G-O-V. It's quick, it's easy, it'll take less than 10 minutes to complete, your information and privacy are protected, and your response helps to direct billions of dollars in federal funds to local communities, for schools, for roads, for guiding how an estimated $1.5 trillion a year in federal funding is distributed for health care and other public services in local communities. The demographic data are used by businesses to determine, for example, where to build new supermarkets, and by emergency responders to locate injured people after natural disasters. And the data will be used to determine the number of seats each state has in Congress and your political representation at all levels of government. Now, most people are ill-informed about the census, and immigrant families, undocumented families, and mixed-status families may be especially fearful. But there is no question on the census about citizenship, political affiliation, banking information, or Social Security number. None. The 2020 census is the first in the U.S. since the rise of social media, the first ever count that's primarily online. Again, that's my2020census.gov. The records are kept confidential for 72 years until released by the National Archives. Every 10 years, when a new set of individual records is released, it's eagerly anticipated by genealogists, historians, and researchers. Courts have found that the census does not violate the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, and also ruled that it is not a violation of a citizen's right to privacy or speech, and that the degree to which the information is needed for the promotion of legitimate governmental interests has been found to be crucial. Now, the 2020 census form includes a handful of questions asked of every person in a household, including the head of household. Name, relationship to person 1, that's head of household. Sex, age, date of birth, Hispanic origin, and race. The White House's Office of Management and Budget requires the Census Bureau to ask about ethnicity in terms of Hispanic or Latinx origin before asking about race. The ordering is designed to capture the racial diversity among people of Hispanic or Latinx origin. Now, also asked is the number of people living or staying in a home on April 1st, 2020. Whether the home is owned with or without a mortgage or loan, whether it's rented or occupied without rent, a phone number for a person in the home, and the name, sex, age, date of birth, and race of each person in the home is also asked, even though race itself is a total mythology. Well, never mind. They'll catch up. Now, while paper forms are only available in English and Spanish, you can respond online or by phone in Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, French, Haitian Creole, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. And the Bureau is also providing video and printed guides in 59 non-English languages, as well as a video in American Sign Language. If a census taker visits your home because maybe you didn't file yet or time has elapsed since you tried to file and then didn't, and if she or he doesn't speak your language, you can request a return visit from a census taker who does speak your language. Because COVID-19 has displaced many college students, the Bureau is advising students who left school but usually live off campus to respond online using their address at school. You shouldn't count anyone living away from home, at college, or in the armed forces, or anybody in a nursing home, jail, prison, detention facility, etc., as of April 1st, 2020. You leave these people off your questionnaire, even if they will return to live home after they leave college. But the nursing home, military, jail, etc., may otherwise be counted twice. Happily, same-sex husband/wife/spouse and same-sex unmarried partner are now both listed, along with opposite sex in both cases. The census form takes 8 pages or so on paper or online, and then it appears immediately afterward in Spanish, so just scroll down. And you can also call toll-free numbers and respond by phone. Remember, Federal courts have permanently blocked the Trump administration from adding to the census the question, is this person a citizen of the United States? So persons with no documentation need not fear anything, and in fact they could and should fill in the form. A judge in California wrote that including that question would threaten the very foundation of our democratic system. By the way, you can skip questions, submit an incomplete census form, and still be included in the head count. Right now, we're being drastically undercounted because of the virus, because of moving up the date, and because of the Trump regime's many attempts in court and out to mess with the data. You know, the first census turned up only 3.9 million non-Indian Americans, including nearly 700,000 enslaved persons, a result in total that President George Washington and Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and other high-ranking government officials dismissed as an undercount. Quote, "Our real numbers will exceed greatly the official returns of them," close quote, wrote Washington, who put the blame on negligent census takers, as well as on, quote, "the religious scruples of some, and the fears of others that it was intended as the foundation of a tax," period, close quote. Washington worried about looking weak in the eyes of the European powers. So today we need to show up for the census in massive numbers, the same way we will for the vote, so that there can be no mistake about our presence and our demand for both representation and resources. In other words, there's every reason to do this, and really none not to. Remember the feminist movement saying, you have to see it to be it? Well, you have to count it to see it. And if we're not counted, we disappear. Census is the government's largest peacetime operation ever. Let's use it. mycensus2020.gov. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.